So I get to introduce Tim. I'm like the good person to do it. I'm not bound to the facts. And of course, after you've seen this film, you really already know about his life and his passion for rivers. And of course, many of you know him. But I just wanted to add to that, we know him as a local person. He's also really been recognized nationally for his work as a photographer and writer. He's won some wonderful national awards, and he speaks about wild and scenic rivers all over the country. We think, oh, he's just here in the Gold Beach Library, but he is doing this year, I think about 70 talks all over the country, trying to help people understand the importance of rivers. So I'm really grateful and proud of him for that. And I do have to tell you, my favorite award that Tim has won, I mean, of all of writing awards and such, the best one ever is that he was voted one of the top 100 paddlers of the 20th century. So
that was the last century. Kind of dated here. And I did, for a change, you get to see me lip sync to the sound, because that's a relief, right? Anyway, I'm psyched to be here and to see this crowd of friends and new friends, and just honored that you've all come to hear this story about wild and scenic rivers. And I can't think of a better place to do it. We've been saying it, but we're the Wild Rivers Coast. We have a greater concentration of national wild and scenic rivers than any place in the country. And so what better place to celebrate the 50th anniversary? So I got to spend a couple of years writing one of my latest books called Wild and Scenic Rivers, An American Legacy. And what I'd like to do now is show you a little bit of what I got to see while working on this. I think maybe we should switch mics here. Can someone help me with that?
yeah, we got it.
Yeah, with the lapel mic. And so I'd like to show you a little bit of what I got to see working on this book, and tell you a little bit about what I learned as well. So I'll just start. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Trying to go with that. The mic comes. So I think we all realize that from mountains and forests and grasslands all over our country, rivers are the lifelines that so much else depends upon. Recognizing the value of the citizen conservationists and congressional members and some enlightened bureaucrats within the federal government recognized that we needed to protect the very finest that were left. And the great news is we've gone from 8 rivers originally to over 300 today. Yeah, let's try this one.
What's for the numbers at?
Let's go with this.
So, this is number 1.
Okay, that sounds good so far. Let's hope for the best. So we've gone from 8 to over 300. And so maybe now is just a kind of a good time to think about how all of this happened. And also to think about what the future might hold for the finest rivers in America, and a lot of other fine rivers that are not yet protected as well. Good time to do that. 50th anniversary, it's kind of the teachable moment, so to speak. There, the Owyhee River in Oregon, another Oregon river in a very different kind of landscape. The seeds of thought for this program began out of two different concepts. One was that natural rivers are incredibly valuable for many different reasons. I'm not going to get really into all those. They're also very threatened. And at the time the seed was planted in the 50s and 60s, the big threat were large dams that were being built all over the country. This problem went back a long way. Henry David Thoreau even lamented the loss of Atlantic salmon here on the Concord River in Massachusetts when Billerica Dam was built, still standing today. This is Yosemite Valley. The only valley that was similar to Yosemite was Hetch Hetchy Valley on the Tuolumne River to the north of that. John Muir fought his last great battle trying to prevent this reservoir from flooding that valley, and he failed. So the loss of rivers to these big dams came from there in the west to here on the Allegheny River in Pennsylvania, where a treaty that the Seneca Indians signed with George Washington was broken to build Kinzua Dam. So these dams, some of the dams made sense. We sort of needed some of them for different reasons, but in the process we lost some of our greatest fish runs and wonderful sport and commercial fisheries. We lost wildlife habitat, we lost communities that were flooded in the canyons and valleys where these dams were built. Back again when this idea was started, there were 70,000 large dams already built on every major river in America. Another 10,000 proposed, planned, or under construction, including Elk Creek Dam here on a Rogue River tributary that was stopped after a third of it was built. Here on the North Fork of the Flathead River, the Army Corps of Engineers proposed a dam, a site called Smoky Range. It was stopped in the 40s, but only because it would have flooded into Glacier National Park. It was very unusual then for a dam anywhere to be stopped. This really didn't faze the Army Corps of Engineers at all. They simply moved the site over to the Middle Fork of the Flathead River, at this site called Spruce Park. But that ended up being a very consequential choice for, just put it down there, and thank you, for the history of river conservation. Because these two guys, twin brothers, John and Frank Craighead, anyone know of them? The wildlifers here know, they were the pioneering wildlife biologists in the West. These guys invented the radio collar for tracking mammals. They started all the original grizzly bear research in the Northern Rockies. So they knew Montana, they knew the Middle Fork of the Flathead as the wildest river in the state. They fought that dam and stopped it from being built. But in the process, more importantly, they realized that the quest of river conservation would be an endless battle of catch up against these dam proposals unless we had a positive program to set rivers aside ahead of time. They bounced their idea up through the bureaucracy. It got to Stuart Udall, Secretary of Interior under President Kennedy. I was fortunate to interview Stuart a number of times before he died here several years ago. And in 1983, my key interview with him, he explained his own personal transformation. He said, "Tim, I went to Congress from Arizona, and you could not do that and not be in favor of dams. So I voted in favor of everyone that came down the pike. But once I became secretary, I had to face these questions with a greater sense of statesmanlike responsibility for the whole nation. And in doing that, and with the help of citizen conservationists across the country, I realized that we had done a very poor job of balance. So that's the key word here in this program. It's one of balance. We dammed so many rivers, virtually every major one in the country. Let's set aside a few of the finest that remain. From the very conservative state of Idaho, Senator Frank Church drafted the first legislation. President Johnson, in his State of the Union address in 1965, addressed river conservation, the first time that has ever been done. We should not underestimate the influence of Lady Bird. Lady Bird was a great conservationist with terrific influence over her husband in matters like this. As a result, the Wild and Scenic Act was passed in 1968 by, get this, a unanimous vote in the Senate and a 265-7 vote in the House. Back in the good old days of bipartisanship, when you really had a good idea. Designated in the first bill were 8 major rivers: the Middle Fork of the Feather in California, the Middle Fork of the Salmon in Idaho, the Rio Grande in New Mexico, the Nemacolin and St. Croix in Wisconsin, and of course the Rogue in Oregon. Our Rogue River at the time was probably at the very top of this list. The planners with the Forest Service and the Interior Department recognized this as a classic wild river of the West. You can't have a wild river system without the Rogue being in it, with its great white water, its fabulous fisheries, and it's just it being just the lifeline of this whole region. So the Act also recognized that many other rivers should be protected, but couldn't be in the initial Act. It set protocols for adding rivers, and it named 27 for specific studies, including Pine Creek here in Pennsylvania. To be designated, a river has to meet only 2 requirements. First, it has to be free-flowing, that means no dams, and it has to have 1 or more outstanding natural values, which can include geology, water quality, fisheries, here we are, Chinook salmon on the Rogue again, wildlife, hydrology, the archaeological sites, historic sites, scenery, and recreation. Here we are on the Chetco River, and recreation of all kinds for all people. This is a big net that we're throwing for protecting rivers across the country, rivers that serve everybody. So what does it mean to be designated? Well, the first thing it means is no new dams. That was really important on a river like this, the White Salmon in Washington. 7 hydroelectric dams were proposed there and blocked by its designation. It also requires that a management plan be done by the administering federal agency. That plan addresses recreation use and a whole suite of other issues. It addresses land use, but it's important to understand here that the federal government cannot regulate private land use. That is not on the table. That is only a job of local governments. But the planning process sets the stage for working together with local communities and governments to do that job on their own, so that we don't see development like this on the floodplain of the Allegheny River that is just there prone to damage in the next flood. So the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act changed the way our nation looked at rivers. We went from a policy of build any dam anywhere at any cost to one of let's protect the very best that remain. The program was intended to grow. That didn't mean that it actually would, though, and in fact it kind of didn't for a few years. But then gradually support grew across the country for adding rivers to this system, and here was one of these sites, Hell's Canyon of the Snake River. At the border of Idaho and Oregon, a whitewater boater recognized that Hell's Canyon was threatened. Half of it, let's remember, was already dammed by Idaho Power Company. The other half was slated for flooding with a dam right here that would have been 600 feet high. This boater went to Seattle, the nearest Sierra Club office at the time, knocked on the door, a cold call. A young lawyer by the name of Brock Evans answered and became convinced that the Snake River in Hell's Canyon should be protected. He filed the paperwork to appeal the Federal Power Commission decision to permit the dam minutes before deadline, the midnight deadline of the due date. That delayed the dam for 2 years, and Idaho conservationists and Oregon conservationists were able to go from flat zero in political momentum to Governor Cecil Andrus of Idaho saying that Hell's Canyon Dam would be built, quote, only over my dead body. What a guy. As a result, we can go there today and see one of the deepest canyons in North America just the way it was. Another one of my favorite stories about additions to the wild and scenic system relate to the 5 great river systems of Northern California, just across the border from us, starting with the Smith, going on down through the Klamath, the Trinity, the Eel. In the 60s, a dam was proposed here at Dos Rios on the middle fork of the Eel. A lot of other dams were planned in Northern California as well, some 30 of them in the state water plan. Northern Californians did not want this, and they managed to get a bill passed in the state to block passage in a state scenic river system. But Governor Jerry Brown, first time around, back when he had hair, recognized the vulnerability of this because there are a lot more people in Southern California than Northern California. And when push came to shove, they could overturn the state designation easily. So for rivers like the Smith here, the North Fork of the Smith, one of the most pristine rivers in California, they were still in jeopardy. He recognized there was a path toward protection at the federal level. Since they had state protection, a governor can request designation by the Secretary of Interior. He made the request in the summer of 1980. Jimmy Carter was president in the last year of his presidency. They had to do an environmental impact statement for the designation of 1,500 miles of river. No one thought it was possible to do that in 6 months' time. A team of planners went together, went to work in Sacramento. Here's the Klamath River at risk, working night and day. Meanwhile, another team of lawyers in a way fancier office in Sacramento went to work night and day to block this. These are the lawyers for the Southern California water industry, the Northern California timber industry. They didn't have to win a thing. All they had to do was delay the environmental impact statement's approval for 6 months. They filed appeals no less than 5 federal district courts. The months worked down to weeks, worked down to days. Here's the Trinity River. Indeed, Ronald Reagan was elected president. He requested all of Jimmy Carter's cabinet secretaries to resign the day before inauguration, and they all did but one. That one was Cecil Andrus again, now Secretary of the Interior. He said, "I'm staying till the end." As it turned out, 19 hours before Reagan was sworn in as president, the final judge approved the final environmental impact statement. A courier rushed it over to the Interior building. Cecil Andrus signed the papers designating 1,500 miles of Northern California rivers protected from those 20 dams that were then proposed. So, kind of takes my breath away still. Here's the Eel and all its forks included. There's the River of the Redwoods here, protected the Klamath for 200 miles from Iron Gate Dam to the ocean. The next really big gain happened in Oregon in 1988. Most of these rivers, there were a few already designated, but most of what you see in this map was added to the national park through a very different route. The Forest Service and BLM do land management plans, and by this time, as part of their regular planning process, they were required to address a river's eligibility for the wild and scenic river system. So conservationists in Oregon went through those plans. They pulled out 50 rivers that were top candidates. They went to Senator Mark Hatfield, a giant in the Senate at the time. He sponsored a bill. One fell swoop, 53 new rivers came into the system, the biggest single gain ever. And to this day, it makes Oregon the state with the most wild and scenic rivers in the nation. Here's the headwaters of the road. The lower road was included, if you remember, in the original act. The upper road was added here in Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest. There's Ann getting a drink of water out of the source of the Rogue River. This is the spring where Crater Lake pops up out of the ground, starting the path of the Rogue River. And here's the upper Rogue in the wintertime further downstream, and further down this fabulous upper section of our river. It included the Elk River. Thank you, Jim Rogers. Where are you, Jim? Somewhere here. And a few others really championed the cause of this river that we have here, right here at home in Curry County. There's Jim in one of the old growth groves. Of course, the elk is so special because much of it was not clear-cut. If you fly across the Coast Range of Oregon, 95 to 98% has been clear-cut. It's a sea of clear cuts from the air, except for the Elk River. It's the island of green. And because of that, we have that fabulous clear water and that fishery that still survives there. It included the Chetco. Little Chetco is actually the wildest river south of the Olympic Peninsula. The whole upper 2/3, mostly in wilderness, all in national forest, no dams, no development, no bridges. very few bridges, and then very little development almost the whole way down. Absolutely crystal clear water. This was taken this year, even after the big fires. The upper canyons of the Chetco there, just a phenomenal natural resource. And the lower river, that wonderful stream that we know for steelhead fishing in the winter and for swimming in the summer. We even designated rivers in Puerto Rico. In 2002, this one was protected, but along about this time, the wild and scenic river system slowed down, and there were a number of reasons for that. And this site kind of goes to the core of that. This is the Stanislaus River in California. Anyone know of it? At the time, it was the most floated white water in the West, the deepest limestone canyon on the West Coast. 600-foot dam proposed. Friends of the River in California fought that proposal, but they lost. And this amazing place that brought people joy in a way that no place else could possibly do was flooded by New Melones Dam. What we didn't realize at the time, and I was at the center of this controversy, what we didn't realize at the time that this was the last great, wonderful natural river to be lost at the epic scale. This marked the end of the big dam building era in America. Not that it won't come back someday, not that there haven't been other dam fights that followed, but this was the last big one that we lost. And the reasons for that, a lot of the economic sites were gone, the conservation movement gained traction in Congress and so forth. The good thing about that is that it allowed other issues to float to the surface of river conservation, like toxic waste, like feedlot and agricultural waste, like steep slope clear cuts here right on the Chetco to the left that are going to erode and cause landslides and our great spawning beds to fill up with silt. It allowed floodplain management to rise because floodplain development is actually the leading cause of loss of natural river values in America today, and of course, enormous personal losses as well. But along with this, the kind of unfortunate thing was the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act was sort of left behind because if you don't really have to work for national protection to stop a dam, then a lot of people don't want to engage in political process. And in fact, there are reasons that we need to continue growing the system anyway. But it did slow down, but it never really stopped. And then in 2008, there was a big campaign to designate 40 new rivers as part of the 40th anniversary of the Wild and Scenic System. The big guy on your left here, Bill Sedevy, director of Idaho Rivers United, did what everyone considered impossible at the time. In the very rural, very remote region of southwestern Idaho, he got rancher support for the designation of 16 rivers, tributaries to the Bruno and the Owyhee systems. And in Wyoming, where even the Snake River, this icon of river and mountain scenery in America, went unprotected, Scott Bossy of the Greater Yellowstone Coalition recognized that one of the Wyoming senators, another very conservative state, had grown up on a dude ranch at the edge of Yellowstone. He went to see him, convinced him of the value of protecting rivers. In fact, the whole economy of the region depended on them. And another 16 tributaries to the Upper Snake were added in 2009. So that's kind of a view of the growth of this system. What happens after rivers are designated is very important too. The Forest Service, the BLM, the Park Service, a few by the Fish and Wildlife Service are managed by these federal agencies to protect their outstanding values. That management includes issues such as recreation access and facilities and having them be good facilities that don't impact negatively on local communities, that do the job. It includes addressing conflicts in use, which you might see there, but here on the road, we resolved part of that conflict by having the lower and upper ends of the designated river be open to jet boats, but not the middle section, which is reserved for non-motorized use. So it sets the stage for resolving issues like that in an amenable way. Here's our buddy Steve DeSica, river ranger on the road, maintaining the bear fences that we need there to on the lower Rogue River to to address the issues of bears along that river so campers put their food in there and protect it. And here's Indigo Scott in the Flathead National Forest cleaning up an illegal fire ring there that was built in a space where they're not allowed. So we have these federal agencies there doing the job of effectively managing these rivers after they're designated, an extremely important job that we need to support them in doing today all over our country. So going back to the days of the Craighead brothers, it's kind of interesting to just reflect on what we've gained and what we've lost. And to me, the really big gain of this program are those rivers that would have explicitly been lost to dams and diversions and big water projects had it not been for them being included here. And some of those sites are the Tuolumne River in California, the Delaware in Pennsylvania, river that was slated to be dammed until it was added to the program, a fabulous recreational river of the Northeast, the Niobrara in Nebraska, the Red River in Kentucky, the Rio Chama in New Mexico, the Kings in California, and many others. This is a map of the program. You can't really see the details, but you get the drift. A lot of the rivers are on the West Coast. In fact, 70% of the designated rivers on the 4 West Coast states. Oregon being number 1. A lot of the country is very underrepresented. They're classic rivers like the Green in Utah, free-flowing for 400 miles through canyons like this, not protected. The Southeast has very few designated rivers, even though the streams there are incredibly important for their biological diversity. The Great Plains has very few. So we have challenges, and now we have the greatest challenge of all, which is climate change and global warming. And rivers enter very prominently into this issue as well, because the cold water coming from tributaries like this is very important to main stem streams down below. It makes our rivers coming from areas of big snowmelt and from glaciers very important, as well as streams that come from forests that remain uncut, where the streams are clean and pure and cold. This one, Yukonon Creek, a tributary to the Klamath, its cold water is desperately needed by the main stem of that great river for the salmon and steelhead that once made that a fabulous fishery but are now imperiled. Spring-fed rivers are very important, again, for the cold water they provide to native fish like these West Slope cutthroat trout in the Flathead River of Montana. Here's a threat we never really thought we'd have to face, and that is of rivers being taken back out of the Wild and Scenic program. The Merced, the river of Yosemite, is at the front line of threat here because an irrigation district downstream wants to raise a dam. To do that, they have to rescind protection for a part of the Merced River. It's not a lot of mileage, but it would be a very bad precedent. It'd be like taking a chunk of Crater Lake National Park back out of the park so you could build a shopping mall or have a strip mine there. So it'd be a very dangerous precedent, a threat that we still face today. And here closer to home, we have another threat of strip mines for nickel at the headwaters of some of our finest streams, including the North Fork of the Smith here. The Wild and Scenic program protects a corridor that's relatively thin, and it's only for the designated region. Areas upstream of that can remain imperiled, like the upper end of the Smith and headwaters of the Illinois and Rogue do today. So facing this threat, we launched a campaign to get a temporary withdrawal from new mining claims, generated massive public support. Here's one of our meetings in Brookings with several hundred people almost unanimously voicing support for that. Our wonderful Congressman Peter DeFazio championed a bill to set aside that area with a temporary withdrawal to hold off the mining threat until permanent legislation can be passed. And along with Jared Huffman, the congressman from Northern California, these two guys are great heroes of ours for championing protection for these rivers and for protecting us from that mining threat. Unfortunately, we have to carry that ball forward now and get permanent protection with a full-on bill by Congress, which hopefully we'll be able to do here in the years coming. And here's our team of activists working on this. You recognize Dave, Sunny, and Mark, and so if you recognize them here, talk to them afterwards about how you might engage in this campaign that continues. So the good news here, after 50 years, is that we've gone from 8 to over 300 protected rivers. The wild and scenic system remains the premier method of protecting natural river values in America, and for that matter, in the world. Whether you're on a wild exploratory like we are here through the Chetco headwaters as it cuts through the heart of the Siskiyou Mountains in an extremely remote part of our state, or just a lively day of paddling here on Wilson Creek in North Carolina, or a lazy day floating on the Niobrara in Nebraska, or the Allegheny in Pennsylvania, we all need these rivers. They are places for everybody. This is a big net we're throwing here for the protection of rivers in America. We need them for ourselves, and we need them for the next generation. And, of course, for all of the generations to come. We need these rivers for the clean water that they provide to all of us. We all drink water. Our bodies are 67% water. Every drop comes from a river or from groundwater, which is intimately connected to the surface flow. The rivers literally flow in our arteries and our veins. We need clean water. We need them for the escape they offer to us, so we get back to the natural world, for their importance to the health of our psyches and our spirits. We need them because they are lifelines of entire ecosystems. So think about what rivers mean to you. Think about what they mean to the next generation, like all these kids that I ran into as I paddled down the Namakagon River in Wisconsin. And join with all these others I've talked about who have acted with courage and passion to protect the rivers that they loved wherever they lived all across our great country and here along the Chetco River and our rivers of Southern Oregon. Each and every one of us can engage in the health and the well-being of a great natural river wherever it happens to be. So thank you so much for joining me here tonight. Thank you so much, and I again want to thank the groups that have put this event together here. Kamiapsis Audubon, which works on activist campaigns as advocates for the environment in our area. The Watershed Council, which works on great restoration and monitoring work all over our county. The Native Fish Society, working for native fish. The Wild Rivers Land Trust, which works on protecting private land throughout our region. And of course, the Forest Service. We couldn't do this without dedicated public servants in these federal agencies championing the cause of river protection as well. So thanks to all of these groups and to all of you. I'm really honored that you're here spending your time with us tonight. And that's about all I have to say, except that I would love to sell you a book. So, anybody, please take a look at the books on that table. And again, it's an honor to be with you here tonight. Thank you so much.